Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight on this rainy Northwest evening. I'm so glad you decided to join us for the first History Talk speaker series of the year. My name is Erin Quinn Valcho, and I am the museum curator for the Lacey Museum. If you have not already done so, please do go ahead and silence your cell phone at this time. We'd really appreciate that. Thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to share our upcoming events. I saw many of you taking our flyers, but coming up on Wednesday, February 12th, you can join us for a presentation by Dr. Quintard Taylor on the African American legacy in Washington State. And then on Tuesday, March 24th, we look forward to hearing from local historian Shanna Stevenson on the centennial of women's suffrage to hear about local suffragists. And if you haven't already, please sign into our sign-in sheet after the presentation. It really does help us justify ourselves to our funders and to the city to show them how much community support we have. It's really appreciated. Now, on to why you are all here. Not to hear me talk, but to hear Dick talk. So, Dick Pust is going to tell us about KGY Radio, one of the very earliest stations in the state of Washington that started right here in Lacey. Dick Pust is a lifelong broadcaster, having spent over half a century at KGY. He is a Washington State Association of Broadcasters Broadcaster of the Year and has been recognized nationally by the National Association of Broadcasters as a Personality of the Year nominee. Dick has a BA in political science from St. Martin's, where he is a distinguished alum. He grew up in Olympia and graduated from Olympia High School, and in 2004, he was inducted into the school's Hall of Fame. And Dick is currently writing a book about his experiences at KGY, which I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to reading. You can still hear Dick's voice over the airwaves, of course, on Olympia's Mix 96.1, where he does a regular Sunday morning talk show called It's Your Community. I've had the pleasure of being on it a couple of times, so I hope you tune in. Please join me in welcoming Dick Pust this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't believe you guys are here tonight. I mean, this is a full house. I'm very, very honored. If you want to hear more of Erin, I understand she's giving a talk at the Schmidt House with Don Trosper's group sometime in April or May. So I'm not sure what all she's going to talk about, but Erin's full of history herself. So yeah, as Erin mentioned, I am writing a book. I got the idea from Dave Nicandri, who is former president of the Washington State Historical Society and used to run the Tacoma History Museum and the Olympia Museum. He asked me to speak at a Tumwater Rotary, and he said, "Dick, will you talk about Conelrad?" And I thought, who cares about Conelrad, and who even remembers what it was? So that kind of got me started. And I realized long ago that I was really lucky in that I was working for a radio station that was one of the first in the United States to be licensed. Licensed in 1922, it was founded here in Lacey. I also had all the material I needed to write about it because I kept a diary since I was 19. And Jan Teague says, "Dick, it's not diary, it's journal." But I looked it up, and there is a slight difference. And I'm going to say diary. I've kept a diary. My grandmother gave it to me, and she died before I started writing in it. And I've written in it every single day since I was 19 years old. And that covers my entire career in radio up to this point. I also, maybe because I have a huge ego, I hope I don't, but I saved every picture of myself, every newspaper article. I saved it all in boxes and strewn around and so forth. And I was also one of those people who writes on the back of every photo who's in it and the date. So I had all the material. And once I started writing the book, people started giving me pictures. So I have a huge amount of pictures that I didn't take that were, in fact, one of the former staff members that I worked with early on He died, but his daughter gave me all the pictures that he had. So I had all this material. And the other day I was writing on my book, sitting in McDonald's, and I was writing about my Rockway Leland building days. And it occurred to me that I was the only one left alive who remembered any of the people who worked in that building with me. And it just made me think, I don't want these people to be forgotten. I am writing the book, maybe 1,000 names in it so far, not detailed stories about everyone, but you get a group picture and that can maybe add 20 names right there. But I just don't want these people to be forgotten. And so that's kind of my mission. And as I look around the room, several of you, whether you know it or not, are already in the book. And there were pictures I didn't have that I had to buy. I don't know if you know this person or not. This is Aaron Quinn Valcho. Notice the rubber gloves, latex gloves. I had to put latex gloves on, and Aaron watched me to make sure I didn't steal any pictures. And I went through all kinds of old KGY pictures and early day pictures, and then I purchased the ones that I needed. And I'll tell you, here in Lacey, you are lucky to have Erin working for you in the library. Erin just does a great job. She's conscientious. She takes care of business. She does everything right. She's a curator, first curator I think I ever met. So Erin, thank you for your help in the book. Also want to acknowledge Darlene Kemery back there sitting next to Erin. She is the person, my book editor, and she makes it look pretty. And she's had 17 years with the Olympian. And I know her best as, before that, she worked for Nally's and designed soup cans. So early on, if you ever bought some Nally's chili because of the label, that's why. Darlene back there is the one who made you buy that can of chili. And Darlene, thank you for coming out tonight to make sure I get the pictures on the air. So let's get to the beginning. This is the first radio station. That was before it was KGY. A guy by the name of Father Sebastian Ruth was really interested in ham radio. And he built this. This was on the St. Martin's campus. And we can go to a newspaper clipping that somebody gave me at one of my talks. Somebody came up and gave me this clipping from the Washington Standard, December 1st, 1916. And I just took it from him and I said, thank you very much. And I know you can't read that, but if that person is here today, I'd like to thank you. But this tells about Father Sebastian and his early days in radio and how he communicated clear across the world. He was monitoring the Kaiser in 1916 and before, and is believed to have had the world's longest radio reception record of the time. And that was right here in Lacey. Well, it wasn't long before Father Sebastian decided he wanted to do a little more than amateur radio. So he built a radio station, started doing programming, live music, and the Federal Radio Commission, or whatever it was called, kind of frowned on this, and they contacted him and says, you need a license to do this. And so he got a license in April of 1922, and the call letters were KGY. You can see them on the bottom part, or sort of the middle of the building there, KGY. And so this evolved into the radio station. I love the car down there, and there's construction going on. And this is what it looked like inside. This was the first KGY, and you notice the St. Martin's. And it drew a lot of listeners. There weren't a whole lot of radios in those days, but they had, it was growing in popularity, but sometimes you had to just hang around outside the radio station. Father Sebastian is up near the building there, I think on the left. And these are students from St. Martin's, and they're listening on a speaker. If you see the speaker on the building, they're listening to the World Series. This was in 1922. And I had the score for you. I forgot to bring it. But Babe Ruth was one of the players on one of the teams, but he was on the losing team. And I can't remember the game that was being played at that time. So I always wondered, I'd seen the original picture, the shack, and I wondered where in the world is that in relation to other things on the campus? And so took a little tour on campus with a guy by the name of Father Peter Tynan. I understand he's done programs here about St. Martin's. And, I should have mentioned also that the radio station couldn't handle all the crowds and entertainers that flocked into that little building you just saw. And so they moved into this log cabin. And so where were these buildings on the campus if you were to go up there today? So Father Tynan gave a little tour, and he's standing where the original shack was. And you can see Old Main in the background there. So that's right about where it was. And if you walk forward with him, I don't have a slide of it or a picture of it, but into the woods was where the cabin was. And not far from there, there's a cemetery, and there's Father Sebastian Ruth's tombstone. I didn't even know there was a cemetery on the St. Martin's campus. Everybody else knew it. Ken Balsley's looking at me right now and says, "You didn't know? I'm a St. Martin's grad, and I didn't know there was a cemetery on the campus?" Well, that's true.
I was at high school at St. Martin's in the early 60s, and that log cabin, when I was in high school, was the smoke shack.
Really? See, this
It was legal on campus.
that's where you went and smoked, huh?
Smoke in the
Were you a heavy smoker?
I didn't smoke.
No, of course not. Of course not. Well, moving along, wow, the clock is moving so fast here. KGY was, and Father Sebastian only had the station about 10 years. In 1932, he sold it to a guy by the name of Archie Taft, and it was moved into the Capitol Park building. And this is on where the State Patrol building is now. That's one of the guys who worked there by the name of Sam Crawford. And Capitol Park building was at 11th and Capitol Way. And it was, at the time, it was one of the big, shall we say, shopping extravaganzas of the day. And there were many businesses there, including KGY. And Sam Crawford, he basically is pretty famous on his own, almost like Father Sebastian. He pretty much came up with the concept of local news and started broadcasting news on KGY. Well, later on, in about 9 years, KGY moved to the Rockway Leland building. And that's how it looked probably in the 40s or the, I don't know, you can tell by the car parked there. And I'm going to sit down so I can see the pictures better myself. If you look a little bit on the roof, you'll see that an air raid siren right next to the tower. They moved to the Rockway Leland building, KGY did, just before World War II started. And the very next day, we'll move to the next picture. KGY's Sam Crawford on the right is interviewing Governor Langley, and this was on December 8th, 1941. KGY was the center of news and information constantly back then. And 30 years have gone by now, as you see this next slide. On the left is Father Sebastian, and that is the sign-in log. And there were 4,000 visitors to the original Father Sebastian facilities in the 10 years that he had the station. But he was with Tom Olson on the right, who owned the station now, in 1952. And they were celebrating their 30th anniversary. And I think we'll just hear a little clip now from Father Sebastian. As we look at the cabin, I want you to listen to an interview that Tom Olson did.
Sebastian, I know you are still an ardent radio listener and critic, In fact, you've offered us many helpful suggestions and constructive criticisms for which we and our listeners
Well, there's a little more to this, so we're going to go back to the slide. I want you to hear the interview best you can. Here we go.
Father Sebastian, I know you are still an ardent radio listener and critic. In fact, you've offered us many helpful suggestions and constructive criticisms for which we and our listeners especially appreciate. You know, Father Sebastian, you are one of America's first disc jockeys, the fellow that introduces a phonograph record or transcription about to be played. I think everyone listening tonight would like to hear you introduce a number, the same as you did in those good old days. Would you mind doing that for us?
Yes, Mr. Olson, we had a special theme song, and one that I think is most appropriate to the location of KGY. KGY is raised in the cabin there and stands in the shelter of the large fir trees that grow upon the hilltop at St. Martin's. On the same hilltop is the monastery, St. Martin's Monastery, St. Martin's Abbey. And so when looking about for a special theme song, we came upon the record in a monastery garden, and we thought that nothing could be more appropriate than that in opening and closing our programs from the log cabin station at KGY. So we used to open the programs in this manner. Good evening, folks. We're back again with you tonight. And as usual, we will start our program this evening with our theme song, In a Monastery Garden, as played by the Albert Kettleby Orchestra.
Okay. All right. I think this mic, is it back on again? Okay. I'm standing. Go back and forth. The old legs aren't quite what they used to be when I was started at KGY. So at the same time, we had a big celebration. Well, I wasn't there then. This is 1952. Rockway Leland building is in the back. And this picture was probably taken from the Knox Hotel, which was across the street from KGY's Rockway Leland building. I doubt if anybody here even remembers that, but it's possible. The Knox Hotel is long gone. But look at the crowd. Now, this was part of the celebration. I know some of the people on the far right, and I especially know the contest barrel. There was a big wooden barrel that had a crank on it that names would go in, and I don't know what kind of prizes were being given away that day, but they must have been pretty good because people were out there hoping to win some of them. So, what does the Rockway Leland building look like today? Almost exactly the same except for the colors. And I want you to take a look at these people. David Rao and Tony Holm, they have been in the Rockway Leland building for 30 years. They celebrated their 30th anniversary this month and got a citation there. You can't really read it, but it's from the Olympia City Council, signed by Mayor Cheryl Selby. And I took this picture just a few days ago, and they're very proud to have been in the Rockway Leland building for longer than KGY. KGY was there 19 years, and they've been there for 30 years now with Mix 96.1 KXXO FM. So after KGY left the Rockway Leland building, by now I'm working there. I started there when I was 19. I was one of the first people to ever work in this, maybe the first one, because I babysat the building a little bit. They got a new transmitter, and back in those days, you had to take readings every 30 minutes, and nobody wanted to be down to a station with nobody working there yet, except the transmitter, so they sent me down there to kind of twiddle my thumbs and every 30 minutes go take some readings on the meter. So I was actually in that beautiful building. Take a look at it. The deck, it's been added on to since, but at that time, the deck ran clear around the building on the first floor. And so if I got a little tired or something, wanted to do some laps, I'd run around the building. And the studio is right on the front there that you see. And back in that time period, most radio stations had little booths, like little closets. That's where the announcer sat. But we sat at KGY in this beautiful, gorgeous building with the view of the bay. The tide came in. You can see water goes clear around the radio station. One of the most beautiful spots in the world. It was advertised as Olympia's most, or the world's most unusually situated radio station, and indeed it was. And I worked in that building for over 50 years. It was just what a pleasure. You see the mountains in the north, the seagulls. We had a pet seagull in a contest one time. The seagull landed messily so on the first floor railing and watched the program every day. We had a contest. We named her Jockette. So it was a lot of fun. So a lot is made of the South Sound Center KGY. That is Bob Bloom, and one of those microphones is KGY's. We were there. And we actually opened a studio at the South Sound Center Mall. Lasted about 6 months maybe. I was the guy who got to run it. Really, it only operated maybe 1 hour a day, and it was a real hassle. I had to pack up all the records and move them to the studio there, play them, and then go back to the station. It was kind of a hassle. And Tom Olson, probably, he was a fantastic businessman, but this might not have been his best thing, because I think he thought that by having a studio at the mall, people would just be dying to buy advertising. Well, it turns out that Woolworths and all the others biggies there, they didn't have their headquarters or decision makers here locally, so nobody bought any advertising. So Tom closed down the South Sound Studios, and I think he turned it over to the Lacey Chamber of Commerce at the time. So getting back to Conelrad. See that ad? Some of you remember the old TV ads that would show up on television. 640, 1240 Conelrad, 640, 1240 Conelrad. Remember that? Anybody remember that? And KGY was on 1240 on the dial. So we were the lucky recipients of having our place on the dial advertised continuously on TV and everywhere you went. Conelrad was the station. Now the only thing is, they said tune to 1240 to find out what to do in case of nuclear attack. Well, anyway, we tried. We were given a Geiger counter, believe it or not. Darlene has seen the Geiger counter. I don't know where it is now, but it was down at the radio station, never took it out of the box. Anyway, back as a young kid, I mean, it's 1961 or something like that, I'm sent to a little class, a trainer, as to what to do in case of nuclear attack. It never occurred to me that the staff at the station expected me to be at the station while they all headed for the hills. The class was held at Lincoln Elementary School, and I don't remember a whole lot of it, except if they start dropping atom bombs, and this is what you need to remember too, never look directly at the blast. You'll go blind. I never forgot that, so if it happens, keep that in mind. The other thing is, you'll probably get hungry afterwards. And so maybe the food supplies have been all wiped out, and this, so help me, this is what they taught us. If you're out scavenging for food and you find a dead cow, it's okay to eat it even if it's partially rotted, because it's sort of like rare meat. It's okay, as long as it's not covered with radioactive dust. If that's the case, you probably better look for another cow. No, I'm serious on this. I'm not making this up. Do not eat, if you find a dead pig or a dead chicken, no, you get sick. So don't do it. So anyway, what was the thinking like back in those days? Well, take a look at this. A bomb shelter was built on the west side of Olympia, above ground. Somebody apparently was selling bomb shelters. And KGY was deeply involved in this. I don't know if we lined up the people that, family actually, that was going to spend a week in this bomb shelter. In fact, I'd love to meet the family members. They must still be alive somewhere. And if you know, or, I'd love to talk to them and get them in the book by name. All I have is their pictures. KGY did live reports from the bomb shelter for a week while they were there. And so a lot of people were interested in this. A lot of people wanted bomb shelters of their own. So crowd scene is next. This, by the way, is at Harrison and Division. And the only building you might recognize is one sort of on the top left there. Used to be the House of Roses, if anybody remembers that. So that's the parking lot. And these people are all watching this family go into the bomb shelter. And did it look like inside? This is inside. And notice the Olympia beer on the lower right. So obviously they were well stocked. And but this was a mentality. Back in this day, one of my favorite books was a book called On the Beach by Neville Shute. Some of you may have read it or seen the movie. It's a real happy movie where the earth has been, there's been nuclear war and everybody's now dying of radioactive poisoning. And most of it takes place in Australia, but some of it takes place in Everett and Pacific Northwest here. And they come up here, and just before they die, they walk around, and there are these dead bodies everywhere, and all decaying from having died from nuclear radiation. I really enjoyed the book. If you get a chance to read it or see the movie, do so. And even in the church that I attended a little church called the Tumwater Evangelical Free Church, which is on, I think it's 2nd Avenue, across from an elementary school in Tumwater. And I remember back in about 1950-something, we had a young people's youth group meet down in the basement, and we were looking ahead to the year 1970. The communists have taken over, and no longer did we have any freedom, so we met in the dark down in the basement and had our prayer meeting and so forth, and pretended it was 1970 and that we no longer had any freedom, and we sang choruses quietly and had candlelight, but that's the thinking back then. Maybe it's coming back to you now. So let's get on to something a little happier, the KGY key hunt. All right. This is 1970, and this is Leroy's Jewelers. You might recognize Miller's next door, and well, that's Capitol Way. 1970, Lake Fair. KGY came up, well, it wasn't our idea, but we were one of the stations in the country that did this. We hit a key, and eventually 3 keys, including one here in Lacey, and you'd win all kinds of jewelry from Leroy's Jewelers. And Ted Clue owned Leroy's Jewelers. He was a big sponsor of KGY, and we figured out we had different clues every day, starting out with something real general like, you'll find it somewhere in Olympia or somewhere in Lacey. And then we narrowed it down, and hopefully no one would find it right away. And that's why we had 3 in case somebody accidentally did find it too early. And we'd give it away during Lake Fair, during a celebration. And these were wooden keys. And we'd hide them under maybe a bridge abutment or in a park somewhere, and give clues, and the first person to find it would win the prize. And one year, the police chief in Olympia was supposed to be hiding the clue, or the key, and we kept giving the clues out, and no one was finding this particular key. And so our station manager asked the chief, where where'd you hide the key? I went and looked. I said, the station manager, and he said, I didn't find the key where I thought it would be. And he said, well, I was afraid somebody'd find it, so I haven't put it out there yet. So anyway, it was a great contest, except we ran it for several years, finally had to give it up because of legal problems. People were climbing over freeway overpasses and looking under tombstones and things like that, and we were afraid we were going to get sued, and so we finally had to stop it. But anyway, this particular time, by the way, let's go back to that last one just for a minute. I forgot some. Okay, that's. I want to point out Greg Clue is in that picture. You can see him. See the hats down below. Greg is the one on closest to you there. Greg Clue, if you know Greg with Clue's Jewelers. That's him. Okay, now the next one that you laughed at. That's me. That's me. And if you look in my left hand, you'll see the key. Can you see it there? Okay. And my hair, just to show you that advertising works. Remember the ads? A little dab of Brill cream. The girls will love to run their fingers through your hair. No one ever did, and I couldn't figure it out myself because every time I touched my hair, it was like, yeah. It was awful stuff. So anyway, I like my jacket there too. That was the KGY uniform. We all had jackets, and I was very proud to wear the KGY uniform. So let's move to when we give the prize away. This is Capitol, the old swim stadium. We're out on the swim stadium. The water that's the swimming area, and the crowd is there, and they're all watching as we're about to give the prize away. Now, the guy on the right is Ty Flint, who does, Ty went on to do great things. He was one of the top Seattle DJs. He was at KGY at the time, started working when he was a teenager, and he went on to be part of the Charlie and Ty team on Cube Radio. Perfect timing with that. It's sort of like a commercial. And the guy on the left is Buzz Stussy, who I understand went on to pretty much international recognition, setting up conferences and stuff worldwide. So, and Ty Flint, by the way, is the morning guy at KXXO right now, Mix 96. So he came back to Olympia after pretty much traveling the country, and this is where he started, and this is where he's happy to be almost not ready to retire yet, but he's every morning on KXXO. And so it was advertised in the paper, and that Bob Hope was here. He was here on October 10th, 1974. That was a Thursday. And I had a little focus group, and somebody said, don't show too much of Bob Hope because nowadays nobody cares. So I don't know if that's the case or not, but I actually was speaking to some kids at Griffin Elementary, and just for fun, I knew they wouldn't know, but I said, anybody here know who Bob Hope is? And one kid says, I know, he worked for the Pope. Well, another kid says, no, he played baseball. And if you watch any of Bob Hope's stuff now, if you can find it, you kind of wonder, well, I don't really think it's all that funny anymore, but but he was a superstar in his day. He's 70 years old here, and we're standing in the middle of the St. Martin's Pavilion. It wasn't the Marcus Pavilion yet, and he's giving me some instructions before I introduce him the next night. This is the night before. Yeah, you like I actually had decent hair back then, and sideburns and the whole thing, and he was in town actually as a fundraiser for St. Martin's College. And I don't think the college, I'm not really 100% sure on this, but I think the college expected him to give his I think he wanted $15,000 for the one show, which back in 1970 or 74 was a lot of money. Kind of still is. I do not think he donated it back to the college. I heard that instead he sent him a case full of Bob Hope drinking glasses. So I think it might have been a wash, but I'm not really absolutely sure. And he did just the one show, and it was packed. It was, in fact, I was delaying the show during this because there were so many people who wanted to get in that they wanted to wait a little bit, and it was a terrible night, lots of rain and stuff, and so. But anyway, he was a huge hit. And so we'll move on to, we didn't need Bob Hope to have big crowds. This is the KGY Homemakers crowd on April 19th, 1977, and that's in the same pavilion. These people came out just for a KGY promotion, a cooking show. Notice there are hardly any guys in the crowd. I took this picture from the stage. And we could really, whatever we did, just drew the crowds. But moving on to other things in Lacey, that's Johnny Lewis. Johnny called me one day and he said, Dick, you've got to get involved in the Lacey Music Arts and Dance Festival. I didn't want to do it. It was nighttime stuff, and I don't go out at night. I get up at 2:30 every morning to go to work, and going out at night is not what I did. But he talked me into going out. And I got involved, and I was just amazed at all the talent in this community. It was just incredible to me. And so, back in those days, Lacey was a little jealous of Olympia and felt that it was different from Olympia and wanted to do something to compete with Lake Fair. And so, they had the Miss Lacey contest. This was 1976. And I'm interviewing Louisa Ward. Some of you may know her as Louisa Ward Shimamoto. She's a very successful businesswoman in Tumwater and one of my Facebook friends, and that's her that I'm talking to. And next to her is another Ward, no relation, Karen Ward, and then on the far right there is Becca Thompson. The very next year, Miss Lacey evolved into Miss Thurston County. This is 1977, and I could name everyone there, but I didn't bring the names with me. But Karen Ward, by the way, who was in the Miss Lacey contest, is, I think, on the far left there. And Carletta, forgetting her name, she's well-known, Taylor is next to her. She's got a different last name now and has been very involved in the North Thurston Education Foundation. You know her name. Carletta. She's here? No, she's not here. But anyway, I wish she was. I'd have her come up here and stand up in front. So now, the next picture, that's me. Erin Quinn Valcho, our curator, emailed me this picture, and she says, Dick, you have any idea who this person might be? She says, I have a pretty good idea, but I want to confirm it. And so I emailed back and I said, yep, that's me. And I said, can I buy the picture? And so she sold me the picture. Kind of a reduced rate, I think she gave me. So I want to tell you about that. That was taken at the Thurston County Fair. And I hate dunk tanks. I will never, it's not for me. I used to think, well, that's not bad. You know, those little kids who throw the balls, they never hit it anyway, so I'll just sit out there and smile for a while and raise money for whatever cause it was. And somebody came along who was really, really good. He should be playing Major League Baseball or something, but bought bucket after bucket after bucket. And by the time I got done, I was, it was not a fun experience. So who was it that bought those buckets of balls? I don't know if you know this guy or not.
No way. I've done him so many times.
We're still friends, believe it or not.
Yeah, because the next year I was on the Dunk Tank and Dick
No, I didn't. I did not do that. I couldn't hit a barn door. So I kind of want to wrap it up here with some kudos for the Lacey Museum. Next picture, this picture here was taken at the KGY 70th anniversary. This was at the Lacey Museum, the original museum. There was a KGY display. I don't know who the two people on the left are, but up above them, Father John Scott, Barbara Carey, who was the station owner, and Bob McLeod on the end there, but before him is the shorter guy, that's Henry Long, who was a war hero. He was on the USS Oklahoma when it was sunk in Pearl Harbor, and he swam through flaming oil and survived and became a boat builder here in Olympia, and was a frequent guest on my radio show. And we'll kind of end it up, the last slide here, with Denise Keegan interviewing Henry at that same event. You can see the KGY display. I'll never forget my interview with Henry Long on December 7th, commemorative day, had Henry on. And I said, Henry, what went through your mind when you realized that you were being bombed and the ship was going down? And he said, oh, S, used the S word. And in those days, and even today, I don't think you can say that word on the radio. And I actually asked an FCC commissioner at a meeting conference that I happened to run into. I told him the story, and I said, it happened a long time ago. He says, if we'd have caught you, no excuse, you would have been fined. So anyway, I hope that someday I have lots of material, lots of air checks and so forth. Ken keeps saying you better give it to the Lacey Museum before it's too late. And so hopefully a nice display will be set up someday in the museum. Again, KGY was a huge part of Lacey's history, and I was just delighted to have been a part of it all those years. So we have a little extra time, and so if there are any questions, Ken?
You're working on a book. When are we going to be able to buy it and read it?
Well, I've been working on it for Ken wanted to know, the sound people want me to repeat the question. So when is my book coming out? I have so far written almost too much, probably close to 400 pages, so I've got to wrap it up. I have not millions, but I have probably hundreds of pictures in there. 27 chapters written, all self-contained, so they're ready to go. I feel like I need to have 3 more chapters, and then it'll be a wrap. So maybe, hopefully, a year. So any other questions? Yes.
What does KGY stand for?
KGY, what does KGY stand for? There's kind of a legend that it stood for can't get you, but that's not really true. The FCC just picks them out at random. Back when KGY began, with 5 watts, it was heard all the way from Hawaii to Alaska to California, and I don't know how far east, but regular listeners in Oregon and British Columbia for sure. So there wasn't much in the way of interference back then.
I think there was some W's in the Midwest and K in the West Coast.
Yes. Call letters. On the West Coast, they're K. On the East Coast, they're W. And there are a few little minor exceptions. I think Philadelphia has one with K. But yeah, that's kind of the way it broke down. Up in Canada, they start with C. And in Mexico, they start with X. So yeah, probably that's now you know more and you really want to know about things. But any other questions?
Was it part of a network?
Yes. Was KGY a part of a network? Very definitely. We were the mutual broadcasting system for many, many years. Also had ABC radio network, and I think there was something called Intermountain Network, and for a while the AP radio network.
When did these come in?
When did
When did they begin?
The networks? I do not know when networks began back early. That I do not know for sure, but I know that when it was in the Rockaway Leland building, for sure it was network and broadcast all those shows like Queen for a Day and half-hour radio shows. Yeah. Yes?
Are you familiar with some of the other early radio stations in the nation, like KGO and Tempest Field, maybe?
KGO with the three call letters would have been one of the earlier radio stations on the air. Any radio station with 3 call letters is one of the original. They stopped giving out 3-letter call letters somewhere along the line, and many of the stations gave those call letters up for one reason or another, including KGY. But yeah, they're rare if you hear a 3-letter call letter radio station. KVI, KJR still exist, KEX in Portland and places like that. So anybody else with a question? Pretty quiet group. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And thank you.